How y'all doing? We got to talk about the Toronto Raptors, the biggest losers of the 2020 to 2024 draft, and the draft hasn't even started. The Toronto Raptors moved back in two significant ways, but they also got a pretty devastating blow yesterday at the draft combine. Let's talk about it. So, first of all, and I'm also going to address some stuff about Zach Edey, why I might be changing my mind about him, who the Raptors could be targeting at 19, et cetera, but also a pitch and perhaps a proposition for the Raptors to maybe move up in this draft, maybe use some of their assets, consolidate, and who they might be targeting. So let's get into this. First of all, let's shout out Player's Choice and the panel for having me on the last 2 days. It's been a blast. It's been really cool to talk hoops with people who seem to understand basketball at a pretty high level. No shade thrown. There are a couple exceptions to that compliment, but for the most part, it was great discussion, and I'm very, very happy about it. And also, it was good to get a lot of exposure for this channel. Um, and let's give a shout out to this community for edging us closer every day to 10,000 subscribers. It's awesome. I'm not even close to what I want to do in basketball yet. I know I got to be a lot better. I know I got to I got to grow up a little bit, and there's a lot of stuff that I got to work on. But I do want to say that when I randomly bump into somebody who's talking to me about Nikola Jokic and they're bringing up stuff that I talked about a year ago, I'm realizing what the power of influence really is. What are we doing here? We're shaping opinions. Really, we're delivering facts. We're deliberating over facts on these call-in shows. We're having discussions around these facts. But I also think that it's important that we are coloring and tainting facts as well. Sometimes, right? We are informing. We are creating takes and stuff, and then those takes they take a life of their own, right? So, for instance, there's a little bit of a viral TikTok video that y'all have been sending me with me going viral for a completely crazy thing that I said that I don't even think is that crazy, which is that I would put Arvydas Sabonis in the top 15 all time. Now, I don't know how many million people saw that video on TikTok, but I know for a fact that more people woke up this morning knowing about Arvydas Sabonis. And for every maybe 10 comments that there are telling me that I'm an idiot for that, there's probably 10 people who probably Googled Arvydas Sabonis. And now I feel like that's a contribution in the right direction, right? I'll bring it back to something that Brian said, actually, where he talked about what the work that he does with Handle Life, and he said we're growing people through basketball. Well, guess what? We're trying to grow people through basketball. We're talking about things like loss aversion and having people think about their finances. It's great. So basketball can be a tool and a vehicle, but also I think that it's important to champion the people who are doing good work. I think we can learn a lot about teamwork and development and being better people by watching the Denver Nuggets. I believe that every leader can get better by watching Tim Duncan and Nikola Jokic. By talking about these things, you're inspiring the world in a positive way. And I believe that when these reels go viral with like 1 million views, I believe some of the stuff that ESPN does to discredit Nikola Jokic or what Shaquille O'Neal and Gilbert Arenas do, I'm hoping that these 1 million, 2 million view reels that we're creating here on this channel are counteracting some of that narrative. I think it matters. So, speaking of narratives, the draft is full of narratives. The narrative is this is a weak draft. The narrative is the Raptors are probably lucky they didn't keep their pick this year, so they can keep their pick next year. The narrative is next year's draft is stacked and solid. I don't disagree with any of that, but just because it's a weak draft doesn't mean there's someone in this draft that couldn't help you. And there's quite a few players that can help the Toronto Raptors. And some of those players went to the draft combine yesterday and sort of had their fate sort of decided. I mean, this is exactly where Scotty Barnes started to pop off as a prospect. If you guys remember, he tested very, very well at the combine, turned out to be a bigger, better shooter, a bigger athlete, tested very well in the vert. Some people had questions about his athleticism, and then suddenly he starts testing really well. And you see this guy up close, and you're like, oh my God. And you start seeing all that Giannis potential that maybe Leonard Hamilton and his high school coaches saw. And now you're seeing it up close in this testing facility. I will say draft combine measurements can be somewhat misleading. Basketball is not a simulation. It is played 5-on-5. Some guys do not do well at the combine. Here's some guys who did not do well at the combine. I'll tell you one right off the bat who did not do himself any good, which was Bronny James, right? Shot the ball pretty well. From what I've heard and from what I've read and from what I've seen, shot the ball pretty well, but measured in a little bit smaller at 6'1.5", barefoot. We don't play basketball barefoot, but still, I think it hurts him that he's not closer to 6'4" because he was considered an undersized two. So now the upside is he's like all the talk was he might be a really poor man's Marcus Smart or Drew Holiday, and those guys are pretty big. But he does have a 6'7" wingspan, so those genetics didn't totally fail him on that. Another guy who didn't do himself very many favors, and certainly when the full numbers come out, we can talk about it, or if there's a link to that. Donovan Clingan really didn't shoot the ball well, really didn't run well, didn't move well. Um, there's a lot of concerns right now, but if you're the team that has the top 5 pick that you're picking Donovan Clingan at the top, I got questions for you, right? Stephon Castle, 6'2" is a lot shorter than the 6'5", 6'6" he's been talked about. So I think that might hurt him a little bit. Nikola Topic was not at the draft combine. He was playing a basketball game and he got hurt. So Jonathan Givony of Draft Express, formerly of Draft Express, now of ESPN, I believe, he tweeted out that he had an injury today. Update, not as serious as we initially thought, and he will be ready to compete for the draft and go through workouts, etc. I think teams are going to like him when they see him up close, but he is a 5-on-5 player, so maybe he doesn't test that well athletically. And just so you guys know, if some of you are not aware, every team does their own measurements and athletic testing as well. So maybe, if that's a large component of how teams are measuring guys, maybe he doesn't do too well in the athletic testing. I'll tell you right now, though, the mind is working with that guy. Another guy that I think maybe you hoped that he would measure a little bit better was Rob Dillingham. I suspected he might measure in at 6 foot, so I'm pleasantly surprised that he measured at 6'1", but 6'3" wingspan, maybe not the greatest. Cody Williams is fine. Reed Shepard at 6'2" is exactly where he's been listed. He's been listed at 6'2", 6'3". Maybe the not so great wingspan doesn't help him too much, but he's still a little bit bigger than Rob Dillingham, but by how much? He did test crazy on the vert. I don't think it really matters, to be honest, with guards or with, frankly, but I'm sure someone is going to be like, it's a white guy with a 42-inch vert, so it's great. Matas Buzelis, also a guy who didn't probably do himself too many favors yesterday, shot the ball sort of poorly, a little bit flat. Zach Edey is a person who did himself a lot of favors yesterday, moving very well, looking a little bit more trimmed down, and I think overall, showing a little bit of that shooting potential maybe. Again, I don't want to be the guy that has to eat the L for the Zach Edey stuff. So I'm just going to say it right now. He's better than I thought he was 2 months ago. And I will refresh my take as I do a little bit more tape dive. But everything I've seen over the last month makes me think that my take on him 2 months ago is wrong. And I need to correct it. He is not a second round talent. I got called out on that today on the panel. And where OG was telling me, hey, like, you're going to be wrong about Zach Edey. I'm like, we don't got to wait 2 years for me to tell you that I'm wrong about Zach Edey. I'm wrong about Zach Edey right now. As a drop big, 15 minutes a night, 10 minutes a night, hardworking, role threat, solid screener. Yeah, you could do a lot worse than Zach Edey. I wouldn't take him top 10, but anything after that is probably fair game. I'm not saying he's going to be a star. I'm saying he's firmly not going to be a star, but he'll be a role player. He'll be all right. Previously, I'd said he was going to be Taco Fall. I'm just straight up wrong about that. He's got a lot more offensive talent than that. Kyle Filipowski, if you watch him play, you probably assume that he would measure the way he measured, but 6'10" with a 6'10" wingspan is not necessarily the greatest thing. But it might make you feel a little bit better if you're a big Kyle Filipowski guy that's pretty much almost exactly the same measurements that had Marvin Bagley at the number 2 pick. So Filipowski's lottery odds just continue to slide just a little bit. Dayron Holmes, I think, shot the ball really well and maybe did himself quite a few favors. 7'1" wingspan, 6'8", 6'8.75. Where have I seen those measurements before? Oh, I know, every single draft prospect the Raptors have ever looked at. Okay. Yves Missi, probably one of the biggest risers, athletically moved really well, shot the ball pretty well. Carlton Carrington, another guy who probably did himself some favors. And is there anyone else that I really want to think about here? Oso, Igodaro. I have a feeling I'm going to be talking about him a lot, so I'm gonna clarify with somebody who knows a little bit better than I do about exactly how to say his name. But I think he played pretty well in the scrimmage. From what I saw, he looked pretty good there. And is there anyone that I'm missing here? Just off the top of my head here, Alex Caravan measured pretty okay. So overall, Daniel saying Pacome is going to be a star. Mark my words. Cool. Um, None of us know these things right now. We can all say, we can stand on our, thing and say this guy's gonna be a star, this guy's gonna be a star. But well, some of us are gonna be wrong, some of us are gonna be right. Let's try to be more right than most people. I was looking back at my draft videos from last year, and I noticed myself waxing poetic a lot about Kason Wallace, saying a lot of things about Kason Wallace. I had a video about a year ago at this time in which I talked about four guards. I talked about Kason Wallace. I talked about who else I talk about? Jordan Hawkins, Anthony Black, and one other guard. I can't remember who right now. And I was just like, I left Kason for last, and I said, this is the guy that I am super sure about. Like, this is the guy, and I want the Raptors to draft him. And if you remember last year, the Raptors walked in with some, luck on their not on their side with the play-in the final game of the season, which they were supposed to draft 11th last year. They get bounced out of the play-in, but the wrong teams get bounced out of the play-in with them, and they fall to 13th. So the Raptors lost out on the 11th pick last year. This year, they lose out on the 16th pick, fall all the way to 19, and they lose out on the 6th pick and fall all the way to 8 and surrender their pick. So talk about back-to-back years of just getting fucked by coin flips and little innocuous things that have nothing to do with anything. Them's the breaks. I don't think it's nearly as bad as Detroit falling from 1 to 5 back-to-back years, but it's pretty sucky because the Raptors obviously could use a win on the margins like this. So there's one prospect that I've been hyping up since he was being mocked in the late first round all the way to the second round, and that's Yves Missi. And I have a feeling that Yves Missi is going to, by the time the draft comes along, I have a feeling he's going to play himself into the lottery. I really do. I don't for sure know that he's going to be successful. I don't. And I very much could be wrong because there isn't a hell of a lot of basketball stuff, and there's a lot of gaps you got to fill in with him. But like, how raw is he? How much can the intelligence translate to whatever? You could do a lot of that. But in terms of just a package, I'll tell you another guy who probably didn't do himself too many favors yesterday, and that's Alex Sarr. Spoke to a friend of mine who's down there at the combine, and he said the most unimpressive first overall pick prospect I've ever seen in my life. That was direct words, direct quote, text. So I feel like I'm going to be right about Alex Sarr, and yet I'm still pretty sure that whoever the hell ends up with the first overall pick is probably going to pick him just out of necessity of satisfying whatever obligation they have to the prototype. And that's what I think, you fall into an issue, which is why I was like a little bit, worried about if the Raptors won the lottery, would they feel a need to do that? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's certain guys when you look at them and you're like, that's not a first overall pick. And I was thinking back to the 2013 draft, which is a draft that is often compared to this draft. And I thought to myself, why did they reach so hard for Anthony Bennett? Well, when you look at the history of number one overall picks, how many of them kind of look like Anthony Bennett? I'm just talking look like. I'm not saying play like. None of them play like Anthony Bennett, but how many of them look like Anthony Bennett? And so there is this element of branding when it comes to a super high lottery pick, especially a first overall pick, where it instantly spikes your ratings. It instantly spikes your, interest, fan interest, ticket sales, etc. I apologize about the construction. Unfortunately, when I do these day lives, I'm at the mercy of the people working in our building, and they've been doing construction for a whole year. So I apologize about that. So when it comes to that, I think the Atlanta Hawks are probably best off exploiting that and trading out. And Landry Field's a very smart guy. So hopefully he figures that out pretty quick, that the first overall pick holds more value as a trade asset than it does as a draft pick. And hopefully they can trade back. The Raptors, I don't want them to trade back. Actually, I believe that the Raptors have a trade piece that is very, very valuable. Now, it's very valuable as a draft pick, but it might be more valuable as a trade piece, completely opposite as the Atlanta Hawks. And that trade piece, by the way, is that 31st overall pick. Now, why is it valuable as a draft pick? Well, Subconsciously, just as there is with the first overall pick, that's not a first round pick. There is that element of that's not a second round pick, right? The second round pick will become very valuable on draft night because there's someone who's going to fall from the 20s, especially in a draft with this much parity. Someone is going to fall from the 20s. People aren't going to have researched it enough. Someone's going to be unprepared. Some team is not going to be able to trade for the 28th pick, 29th pick. They're going to be dying to get this guy, and he's going to slip past 30. At which point, you have a full 24-hour turnaround, and then the Raptors have the first pick of the second day's draft. That pick could be very valuable. I feel intuitively as a trade asset, it will hold more value than as an actual draft pick. Because again, none of these players are worth shit until they get on the court, and then your hypothesis, whether pro or con, is proven right. The hypothetical, however, is important. So the same thing that holds true for the first overall pick in the draft, which is held by the Atlanta Hawks, kind of holds true as well for the Raptors' 31st overall pick, which is held by the Toronto Raptors. There's also that Bruce Brown contract. I wonder what you could get in terms of moving up for Bruce Brown, 19 and 31. Y'all shut the fuck up. Oh. I can't end this live because these guys are drilling right above my head, but I've never seen anyone drill this long. Your GOAT, bro, you should call in and cry about the Pistons pick, bro. Okay. Who's the worst contract in the NBA right now? Jordan Poole. He's in the running. I don't know if he's first, but he's on the podium. All right. How bad is it? Let me know if the audio is super bad. I mean, I could just I could press pause or something on this live and we can pick it up. If it's super bad, they just started going, but damn. Yeah, let me know in the comments if it's super bad. So what I'm saying is, audio is good. I can't even hear it. Okay, good. Okay, it was just me noticing it, and they stopped now. Okay, moving along. So for the Toronto Raptors, I think that moving up would be relevant because I believe that there is a player, and I believe like drafts peak and sink in certain parts, right? Some drafts are really heavy in the second round. We saw that with the draft in which Jeremy Grant went in the second round. I believe the strength of this draft is exactly where the Raptors kind of got bounced out of, which is that 16 range with Indiana. How would I feel about moving up to 9 with the Memphis Grizzlies pick at 9, right? Maybe taking on a little bit more money on that draft pick and having my pick of the litter. You know what I mean? Let me know. Someone saying Monk, Melton, Pacers pick? Huh. So given the fact that the Raptors walked into this fully expecting that they may be picking 3 players, what I'm saying is you could potentially package one of those picks and move up, draft, Tristan da Silva, I think is definitely in that conversation. And I think things will also become a little bit more fluid as we get closer to the draft. But I do believe that there is a real peak in value in this draft. And I think it starts like 10 to 20. Like that range to me in this draft feels like someone's getting an all-star, someone's getting an all-defense guy, someone's getting like probably a defensive player of the year. That is where this draft feels solid, right? Josh was saying, what are your thoughts about trading Jakob? We can definitely talk about, hey, Rob, look up Urish. I'm familiar with him. So I'm thinking of it from this perspective. If the Toronto Raptors want to get a little bit worse, right? The Jakob Poeltl trade is a must, right? But clear house. If you're going to trade Jakob Poeltl, what do you have, Chris Boucher for on this team? Like, just clear out your vets and just go super young. Pull out the, OKC Thunder, Detroit Pistons playbook. Obviously, very different playbooks in terms of the type of players on the roster. I also wonder, is trading out of this draft completely off the table if you're not enamored with anything on the table? I'm not totally against it either. Look, everyone gets really excited about draft picks, myself included. There is a lot of potential. I got excited about Bruno Caboclo. I did for for a little bit there. I'm not even gonna lie and act like it was for a minute. It wasn't for a minute. It was for a full year. I was like, play Bruno. He has secret untapped potential. He really didn't. And he's a pretty solid player today, but he never really turned himself into like what I thought he could be defensively. There's always this potential of the unknown, which I think, is very seductive. In a draft like this, where everything's so flat, you know, you have to find the value. And I believe that the value will be in that range that I'm talking about. Unfortunately for the Raptors, they were in the middle of that range. They were picking ahead of that range. So if the Raptors had the 8th pick and the 16th pick, they're perfect. You reach a little bit at 8, you get your guy, you feed at 16 and you get your guy and you end up solid. Instead, you give up the 8th pick, you end up at 19. And now I'm like, damn, are we going to end up in a situation where 3 guys we identify go 15, 16, 17 or 16, 17, 18? And we're like right there and we're just watching it happen. It's happened before, right? So SP saying, I think the 1-year delay with the Raptors 905 destroyed Bruno's path. I don't know. I'm not gonna like sit here and pretend like if the Raptors had the 905, Bruno would have been super successful. What I am saying is that the Raptors have a phenomenal development program now, and that is very, very crucial for whoever you bring into the system. So would you rather have 1 rookie or 2 rookies? I guess is the debate. Maybe the 1 right rookie. There's also the potential of just trading into this draft without losing anything else. Kind of getting back your draft pick, if you will. Wouldn't that be ironic if you traded Jakob Poeltl and got your draft pick back? Weirdly enough, I think Jakob actually fits pretty well in Memphis. Problem is you have to take salary back because they're not under the cap. Either way, however this floats, I believe the Toronto Raptors will be very, very active on draft night. Extremely active. Like they have to be at this point, right? They have to be. They have assets. And people don't realize just how big an asset Bruce Brown is because he didn't play super well. But he's not an asset as a player. He's an asset as an expiring contract that's convertible. I believe that 31st pick will be an asset because of this renewed, I think this second day, second round pick thing, because y'all realize the second round picks, there's usually 2 minutes in between those picks. So it's 5 minutes between the first round picks. There's 2 minutes between the second round picks. And so when you actually go and you think about it, like the way the drafts usually work, teams have 2 to 3 minutes to figure out who to pick. Why do you think so often it's like 38 and 39 are where like all those great guys get picked up, 37 to 40? So obviously you do your research early, but there's always someone who's going to fall beyond where you were expecting them to fall. And then on draft night, that becomes a nightmare to figure it out. Guy's supposed to be a 20th pick. He's there at 29. You're sitting there at 29. You made a promise to a guy. There's another guy you really like, but there's this guy at 20 that you really like, and you don't know why he's falling. Guess what? He's going to be there at 31. He's going to be there at 31. And now you have a full 24 hours to actually check, to call people, to say, why did he slip? And then you can figure it out. He slipped because they discovered something in the medicals, or they slipped because his ex-coach gave him this really, really negative review, or he slipped because he has a pending court case. Okay. Like all of these things in the moment, you don't have time. There's also the increased ability to negotiate trades. In the minute of these trades, I mean, we've seen draft war room clips from, the Raptors shows and, the open gym episodes. We see how quick these things are. I got this guy on the line. I got this guy on the line. If he says yes and go, if my guy's there, blah, blah, it's so fast. It's so fast. And it's like, I understand it's fast because you want to get it over with. And it's, it's fair because everyone's got 5 minutes. But Noble Venom with a super chat here. Pirtle for pick 9 plus Aldama and offer Isaiah Hartenstein a bag. One, I don't think Jakob Poeltl for the ninth pick gets you an asset attached to it, you're taking on a negative asset. I think that would be a sweep. That would be one of the greatest trades in Raptors history, and I just don't think the Memphis Grizzlies are stupid enough to do that. Second part is you can offer Isaiah Hartenstein anything and everything, and given the Raptors' dire need for a big the year that Hartenstein was a free agent, I find it impossible. And of course, their penchant for tracking analytics. Isaiah Hartenstein was an analytics darling when he played for the Clippers, a darling. So before they signed Otto Porter, I'm sure that they made a call to Isaiah Hartenstein and were rebuffed immediately and told that he prefers to play in New York. That's the problem with free agency. You're not getting chosen by a lot of these players because they prefer to play in other markets, and that's fine. It's taken me a long time to get my head around the fact that certain players just want to be in certain places, but that's the thing. And you got to find players who want to be in your situation. And I feel like an underrated part of this, and I probably brought it up last year several times when I was trying to make a case for why Scotty would be a great leader for this team, is that he has great connections. Increasingly we go into um, every year, every team is looking around saying, who do I want to play with? Now, you might like the end of bench guys on that team, but if you don't like the star, you probably don't want to play there because that's the man. That's his show. That's his locker room, right? So I feel like it's probably a good thing for the Raptors that they now have two cornerstones that are very, very well connected around the league. And that's RJ Barrett and Scotty Barnes. Both guys very connected with their respective national teams. By the way, got both national teams covered with those guys, youth level at least. Number two, they are both guys who have excellent, I would call, interpersonal skills. In terms of like, I find them to be guys that other guys like playing with. You know what I mean? You don't sense like they're the disgruntled asshole that nobody likes in the locker room. They seem to be guys that are like people want to play with those guys. Also, the Raptors have this reputation as a pretty stable organization. So maybe, now that you've moved away from the super international, team that doesn't and the undrafted guys, you know what I mean? Like as much as I admire Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster for finding so much talent in the second round and finding so many talented guys in the undrafted heap, you got to be real with yourself. Access comes down to the early connections you made. I mean, if you follow women's basketball at all, you will know that Haley Van Lith and Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers, and even on the men's side, Jalen Suggs, Scotty Barnes, all these kids that are now 22, they all were in part of Team USA. They all know each other now. They all have each other's numbers. They all have each other's digits. So when one of them comes up for free agency, it's just a really quick call. Problem comes up when you didn't participate in that. You weren't a part of that connection. You weren't in that group. You weren't in those meetings. You weren't in those parties. You weren't, and those early connections, they really do matter. They really do matter. Now, I'm not I'm never going to suggest that the Raptors recruit Cade Cunningham. But if the Raptors ever did want to recruit a Cade, I would lose my mind, to be honest. But if the Raptors ever wanted to recruit a Cade or a Jalen Suggs or a Jalen Green or an Evan Mobley or any of those guys who are on Team USA with Scotty, he is probably going to be a really good sales pitch, right? So I think that that's a bit underrated. And also it kind of helps that some of the league's OGs seem to respect him a lot. We've heard a lot of praise from Kyle Lowry, Kevin Durant, Kevin Garnett, Charles Oakley, etc. People have been very familiar with Scotty Barnes for a very long time, and I think that's going to help you in terms of being a recruiting pitch. Now, I'm not sure Zach LaVine and Bradley Beal see him as like Bradley Beal's been very complimentary of him as well. I'm not sure that either of those guys are necessarily the guys you want on this team, or CJ McCollum or any of those guys, but at least you have a guy that they have been aware of for 6-7 years. You didn't just pluck some guy, out of some village in Asia and said, this is our franchise player, because that guy is very disconnected. And you'll see how many like for as great as Giannis is, how many players have signed to play with him. For as great as Jokic is, how many players have signed to play with him? For as great as Embiid is, how many players have signed to play with him? Those are not all small markets, my friend. And, for as great as Wemby is going to be, how many players are going to sign to play with him? It does come up to these early connections you have. Look at LeBron, look at D Wade and Chris Bosh, that whole connection, Draymond, KD, like similar age, right? So it's just Steph Curry and all that stuff. So I think it completely matters. The social circles that you walk in, markets are meaning less and less as we get increasingly more into podcasting and internet, and everyone's connected. And so I do think that free agency will be a viable option for the Raptors going forward. Maybe you're not going to beat, if the Lakers have cap space, you're not beating them, and New York has cap space, you're probably not beating them. But after that, I think you're in the conversation with Phoenix and Chicago and maybe someone else, especially if the Raptors are good. All the more reason that the Raptors should be good soon. Let's talk about this concept of the Raptors tanking. I do believe it's worth exploring at least because we did have a bit of a conversation in our last live about it. Um, I don't think the Raptors should tank. I don't think they're bad enough to tank. And so, unless you're trading Jakob Poeltl and you're sitting your roster half the year, I don't really think you're in a position to tank, like properly tank to the point where it would yield fruitful results. But that being said, if you are going to tank, next year is a pretty good year to do it. And now you have some draft picks. Here's another avenue the Raptors can explore and probably should explore very vehemently. Now, I know we just went through a very, very, very disastrous situation in which we traded a lottery pick for a journeyman role. Not a journeyman, that's disrespectful to Jakob Poeltl, but a role player who can't shoot, a role player who's slightly overpaid right now, and a role player who may not fit into our long-term plans. I understand that trading a first-round pick for that player was kind of stupid. I also understand that trading a first-round pick for Thaddeus Young, well past the age of 32, was pretty stupid as well. However, that should not mean that you should swear off of trading first-round picks forever, right? There are certain situations in which trading a first-round pick might be fruitful, might be worthwhile, maybe worthwhile because despite the emotions, the chances are that the eighth pick in this year's draft will be lucky to have a career as good as Jakob Poeltl. Doesn't mean you should have traded it, but the facts are the facts. Proven commodities tend to outperform hypotheticals. Tend to. I'm not saying at some point you're not going to trade for an aging Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, and then years later turns out you traded Jason Tatum. I'm not saying that's never going to happen. That's why you need pick protections. But the Toronto Raptors suddenly have an incredible amount of flexibility to make a move that makes them better sooner. And they have salaries and filler that can match up. So here's my question. If, I don't know, a team offers a Mikal Bridges who could fit to what you're trying to do, or a combination of Mikal Bridges and, I don't know, Cam Thomas, or not Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson, or or um or let's look at the highest paid guys in the league and see what's available. Hang on. I want to look at top salaries. Hang on one sec. Spot track. NBA contracts. Okay. Pull it up, pull it up, pull it up. Okay. Crazy. Highest value guys in the NBA, Jaylen Brown, which is freaking crazy. Nikola Jokic, Bradley Beal, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Devin Booker, Hello, John Morant, Darius Garland, not interested, not interested, not interested, not interested, not interested, not interested. Okay. These are the biggest contracts, but that's not necessarily the okay. So mm, there should be a better way to sort through this. Let me try hoop type salaries. Try this out. Try it on for size, player salaries. This should be a little bit better. Okay, perfecto. That makes a hell of a lot more sense. So in terms of 24-25, which is unimaginably the year we're going into, next year's top earnings guys are Steph Curry, Kawhi Leonard, Joel Embiid, LeBron, likely declining that player option, extending whatever, Jokic, Durant, Beal, Jaylen Brown, Devin Booker, Karl Anthony Towns, Jimmy Butler, Dame Lillard. Nobody here yet. But unbelievably, Fred VanVleet manages to make the top 20. Ben Simmons isn't expiring next year. Okay, that's possible. It's possible. I don't know if the Brooklyn Nets trade you more picks, given what they just went through, to get off of him. They probably just eat that contract. They would probably attach like a young player to it. Brandon Ingram is probably the first player on this list where you can make it make sense in your head, right? There's incentive there. He's an expiring. Pelicans might feel they might lose him for nothing. If you're the Raptors, you have to entertain the very real possibility that you could also lose him for nothing. That might diminish his value a little bit. Is that the type of player where salary relief? Because look, at the end of the day, whether the Pelicans want to get rid of Brandon Ingram or not is not the point. They have to sell it to their franchise. They have to sell it to their fan base. You can't just straight up dump a guy for money reasons and not get anything back of value that fans can get excited about. I feel like a couple of picks and salary fillers, they're going to lose. Potentially, they're going to be losing Jonas Valanciunas, who's going to be exploring free agency. You could trade him Jakob Poeltl, Bruce Brown, and a couple of picks and see if they bite. I think it's worth exploring. I think Brandon Ingram is the type of shot maker that might help you out. I think that might be a little bit low for him, though. Who else? Donovan Mitchell. The Cavs maybe fear losing him for nothing. That could be there. Bam Adebayo, I don't think he's going anywhere. Who else? DeAndre Ayton wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. CJ McCollum. That might be, CJ might be one of those give us something to get something type of guys because I'm not really sure. I'm actually positive he's not worth that money, but he's on a descending contract. And he does sort of fit a need for you as a steadying shot maker who can shoot. Chris Middleton, I don't know. The Bucks probably not trading Chris Middleton, championship lore, etc. Julius Randle is firmly on the block. Chris Paul is an expiring contract. Jordan Poole is a poisonous contract. Devin Vassell ain't going anywhere. Chris Porzingis would be awesome if available. Tyler Hero could be available. That's a guy who could be available. John Collins could be available. Anthony Simons could be available. And now we're getting into RJ Barrett salary territory. So we're not talking about necessarily complete dumps, but I think maybe you could look at this list and ask yourself, is this why people were afraid of RJ's contract? He's the 53rd highest paid player in the league next year. He's definitely not the 53rd best player in the league. I think that matters. You have OG Anunoby. Marcus Smart is a player that I've already said we should potentially target. Jared Allen. I don't know what the pick conversion would be on a straight Jakob for Jared Allen swap. I don't know how much more you'd have to give them to take that conversion, but I would entertain it at least. Clint Capella is a player that I think could benefit the Raptors. Weirdly enough, fits a need. But now you got three centers. So would they do Clint Capella for Jakob? Would you do Clint Capella for Jakob Poeltl? I don't know if we do that. It's a different type of player though. You got Miles Turner on an expiring contract. They're not getting rid of him. Then you got Jakob Poeltl's contract. So right around the Jakob Poeltl contract, you got Norman Powell, Duncan Robinson, Bojan Bogdanovic on a expiring, Keldon Johnson with the Spurs, D'Angelo Russell on a player contract. He is declining that contract. Then you got Colin Sexton, right? Colin Sexton with Utah Jazz. Josh Hart ain't going nowhere. Yusuf Nurkic, who we talked about yesterday. And then you got Lauri Markkanen. The problem with Lauri at this point is he will be an unrestricted free agent as well, which means you could potentially make a play for him next offseason. Basically, take all your cap space that you have right now and try to defer it a little bit. Problem with deferring cap space in any case is going to be timing out the salaries of Scotty and Emmanuel quickly. Your best bet is to actually use this cap space as meaningfully as possible this year. You also have Jonathan Isaac, Harrison Barnes, Bogdan Bogdanovic, who's for the Atlanta Hawks, Rui Hachimura, who is just overpaid in my opinion, Kevin Huerter. I think that the Raptors' best bets, probably almost all of them, to make a trade are in the West. Okay, I really do think that. I think the Sacramento Kings are one of those teams. I think the Sacramento Kings would probably prefer to keep Malik Monk as opposed to Look, the Harrison Barnes plus Kevin Herter thing has been pitched so many times. So here's an idea. Okay. Bear with me. Let's figure this out here. Where are the Sacramento Kings picking in this draft? I think they're picking 13th, right? I have a pick for this. I have a pick for the Kings, and I wish Leo was on right now or could call in if he's listening. Because I want to present him with a hold on here. So hold on one sec. So the 13th pick, I believe it's the 13th pick, right? Sacramento is 13. Yes, they do have 13th. Perfect. Okay. So would I trade Bruce Brown and Jakob Pertl and Chris Boucher for Harrison Barnes, Kevin Herter, and the 13th overall pick? Who says no? Let me know. Let me know in the chat. Would you say yes to that? Lay it out again. Jakob Pertl, Bruce Brown, Chris Boucher, right? So that's combined salary. You're actually getting rid of salary in that situation. They're taking on a little bit more money. See if I have a trade machine open. See if I can't open a trade machine. Is it Fanspo? It's the Fanspo. We got to fire up the trade machine, man. This is a trade machine. If you want to call in, call in. Let's make a trade. Hang on one sec. Make me a trade. Okay. Anytime we get depressed as Raptor fans, we have to open up the trade machine and make a trade. That's what we do. This is a toxic pastime. The trending players being traded. Ironically, if you opened up Fanspo like 3 years ago or 2 years ago or 1 year ago, it was impossible not to find a Raptor in the top 5. It was always Pascal OG, Pascal OG. It's funny, they're not there anymore. Now it's all Hawks. Okay. So, team number 1, Toronto Raptors. Team number 2, Sacramento Kings. Let's make a trade. I believe I can make this work. Okay. So, first player, boom. Second player. Okay, hold on. Let me keep Jakob out of this for a sec. Let me just give them defense. Okay. You want a great defender? Let me sell you on Jalen McDaniels. And Chris Boucher. And I will take Kevin Herter / movement shooter and wing depth of Harrison Barnes. And what the hell? Do they not have their pick? Am I losing my mind? Do they not have their pick? What is going on here, yo? They do have their pick, don't they? What am I missing here? It could be a glitch. All right, Fanspo, get on the phone, man. Y'all wrong for this. Unless they know something, I don't know. Okay. Basically, in theory, just add a pick in your mind. I'm just going to add the 2025 pick, but just pretend it's the 2024 pick. Let's go. Got it. Try the trade. Let's see. Does it work? It works. Okay, this is an easy yes, obviously. And in this case, I think it would be pick swap. So you go 19 for 13, right? Save them a little bit of money, right? For Malik Monk. They save the money on the Bruce Brown, right? They get a serviceable, lengthy player who kind of fits into their system. I mean, defensively at least, in Chris Boucher, and they get off 2 years of these two players. Oh shit! You're right. That's it. That's it. Probably the Stepien rule issue. And so they would still be able to trade it on draft night, though. I was supposed to trade Jakob Poeltl. I just got greedy right now and just saw an opportunity to maybe just give them cap relief in order for a pick swap. So in this case, what I would do is I would add our pick to this to move up 6 slots. Does that make sense? Or I would this one trade it to the Kings. So would this trade work? In theory, Raptors trade their 2024 Indiana pick 19th. They get the 13th pick in return. They give up Bruce Brown, right? They give up Bruce Brown. They get off of 3 expirings basically. They give the Kings cap relief. So even if they're feeling a little bit of pain, and basically I'll call this the price of keeping Malik Monk. Okay. What the Raptors can do with this is they have 2 solid, smart players come into their system who are an upgrade on the 3 players they're letting go. So you get a little bit better, right? Plus, with that 13th overall pick, I believe you probably get a better player, right? 13 is right in that meaty range of 10 to 20 that I talked about being really solid in this draft. That might be a possible place where you could even get Yves Missy at 13. I think you can get him there. I doubt he goes higher than 13. So that's one avenue I think the Raptors could explore, where you're kind of just going at it from the perspective that we want players who fit, players who played in Sacramento, especially players who played a major part when the Sacramento Kings turned it around. Solid guys, solid locker room presence, not disruptive personalities. And with Kevin Huerter, solid rebounder, still young enough, good movement shooter. You need shooting. Both guys shoot better than the 3 guys you're shipping out. I think it makes sense. Okay. Let's think about another trade. Where the hell am I? Can y'all give me a team that you think would be a worthwhile thing to explore in terms of trades? Someone's saying Houston's third, probably more enticing packages out there that we can offer for. Memphis is 9th, OKC's 12th. Okay, let's try OKC and Yak because I think that's worthwhile. So we got the Thunder. Let's just assume they get bounced at some point and they don't win a championship. Because if they win a championship, I'm never going to hear the end of it, number one. But they're probably not making, significant trades. That might be wrong too. But let's assume that they get bounced and they identify that one of the biggest reasons they got bounced is because they don't want to play Chet long-term at center. Well, we have a center that can probably plug in 15 to 25 minutes for you every single night and plays pretty much like in line with the type of physical, pass-friendly basketball. He would effectively be a 7-foot Josh Giddey in the sense that he can't shoot. So, Jakob Poeltl to the Thunder. I don't know this, but I have a feeling he don't really want to be here anyway. Okay? Like, I feel like a lot of the reasons he came here and was excited to be here was he wanted to be on a winning team, wanted to play with Pascal, wanted to play with Fred. Well, Fred's gone, Pascal's gone, winning's gone. It might be time to move on. It's also a little bit of a conundrum because every single time I think about playing, drafting one player, another player, I'm always like, yeah, but Jakob can't shoot. It's just a weird team building, piece that you have on your roster. And so I understand that we just gave up the pick that we got for Yak, but I don't think anyone would feel that much worse if we also got rid of Yak, personally. All right. So Jakob Poeltl. And what's coming back is definitely I believe it is the Utah pick, right? That's the 12th. Mm-hmm. And what do we take back? Gotta take back something. Gordon Hayward makes that much money. He's a free agent. It's a good question. What do we take back? Or do they have just cap space? If they have cap space, this is a non-starter because there's no way in hell if they have cap space that they're taking on 4 years. I mean, okay, let me just stop being stupid. They're not trading for Jakob Poeltl. It'd be fun to give you guys a Jakob Poeltl to OKC trade, but I know 100,000% that the OKC Thunder are not trading for Jakob Poeltl. They have major obligations financially coming up in terms of extensions over the next 3 summers, and signing up for 4 years for a center who can't shoot is just not in the cards. Anyways, I believe there was a suggestion for something else here. Hold on. Where are we? Where were we? Okay. Houston's 3rd pick. I doubt it. I doubt you could dangle that away from them. Memphis's 9th is probably the most realistic, and I think that's probably one we should explore. So let's go to Memphis at 9. I don't know what they're going to offer us, but I know what we can offer them. Okay. So from the Memphis side, if we want the 9th overall pick, assuming, I think, okay, they need a center. Jaren Jackson, they need rebounding, they need a center. They lost Steven Adams. So I'm willing to take Marcus Smart. I'm willing to take Marcus Smart. I'm assuming I'm not getting anything else in this. Okay, Marcus Smart for Jakob Poeltl, and we swap picks. So we get the ninth overall pick. They get the 19th overall pick. Does that make sense? I know everybody wants to just fleece every single trade, but that's just not going to happen. So something along these lines. Does that make sense? I don't know who wins that trade. Who wins that trade? Rue's saying, it's funny that Masai says he doesn't like deadline trades, then lets Fred leave for free, then trades Siakam and OG at the deadline. You cannot like something and then be pushed into doing it anyway. I mean, for a team that doesn't like deadline trades, we've made trades in the last 3 deadlines. Thaddeus Young, Jakob Poeltl. Grizzlies win the trade. You think so? Really? They're relatively close to the same age, and Marcus Smart is the more accomplished player. He also fits a significant need for you, even if you could argue Jakob Poeltl fits a very big need for you as well. I do believe you can address some of what you're losing in Jakob in free agency. Look, I acknowledge that he's a hell of a defender and a really good player, and their record with him last year was, I think, 20 and 29, and the record without him was, like, I think 4 and 24, 4 and 28. It was bad without him, right? But if the goal is to tank, wouldn't it make sense to take a bet on a high volatility boom bust player as opposed to a constant, slight floor raiser? Because if Marcus Smart plays a full, I don't know, 65 to 70 games for you off the bench, you're a way better team, right? Plus, you got the 9th overall pick as a bit of a consolation prize for losing for losing the 8th overall pick. Now fans can shut up about it because you kind of got the pick back. Plus, you got a former defensive player of the year. I don't know. I don't know how important it is to win the headlines for the Toronto Raptors, but I feel like there's a narrative here where everything is forgiven if you make this trade. Or maybe it's not. I don't know. The YouTube expert, why move up in this draft? I think it's because I believe that there is significant talent. Let's talk about some of that significant talent and just my brief thoughts on some of these players. I don't want to extend this live to 2 hours of rambling, so let's just go through a few prospects and maybe refresh my takes on some of them. And just go through the entire, 2024 draft on NBA Draft Room and just go through and just some quick thoughts on some of these players that I would be targeting, and this is why I want to make these trades. Basically, I would be targeting one of the following players. Those players are, and these are players that I believe could be available in that place. So I realize Nikola Topic just mocked eighth right now. I don't think there's a chance in hell he's going to be eighth. I think he's going to go top five. Ron Holland, I think he goes higher. Rob Dillingham, I think probably in play here, but could go higher. These are, I think, fairly accurate. So, in terms of 9, 13, 15, whoever I'll be targeting in these ranges that I'm a little bit worried won't be there at 19. East Misi, I cannot say any more nice things about this guy. Super smart, picked up basketball late, crazy coordinated, very athletic, very hard worker. Didn't really know how to play basketball too much yet, but his coaches allowed him to do some fun things with the basketball, throughout the year. I think a lot of people discredit him because Baylor wasn't really a great defense with him, and maybe they feel like too much of a hypothetical, too raw, too this, too that. But I do think that his athleticism projects very, very well in terms of fitting in with how the Raptors want to play basketball, especially around Scotty Barnes, right? Make him a solid screener, get him downhill, and at worst case, I think worst case scenario, he ends up as a younger Clint Capella. Best case scenario, you end up with a Serge Ibaka plus plus. Maybe not nearly as prolific a shot blocker, but a very good shot blocker who has like Surge like athleticism early. If you watch Surge early, like there was some bounce there. So I mean, we're seeing the prototype, right? Derek Lively, etc. Who's the most Derek Lively prospect in the top 10, apart from Alex Sarr, who you could poke some holes in that theory. I think it's East Misi. So that's one guy that I think, Jared McCain did not measure super well, but that was never going to be the situation. I think the situation here is, he's a great shooter. Dodson Connect, who, this mock draft has him going seventh, right? But he can go top five. I think there is a world in which he goes top five. There's also a world in which he falls out of the lottery. I think his range is 5 to 13, 5 to 14. So not falling out of the lottery, but definitely available at 13, 9 in those picks. Salon, I don't have a good feel for yet. I can't comment on him. I watched exactly 2 games and one highlight package. That is not enough to form an opinion. From what I saw, I wasn't super impressed with his feel and motor. And I have the same questions about Alex Sarr, which is I didn't like his motor. He just kind of goes through the motions. He dials out way too often for my liking. I can't have motor issues with you at this age, man. I can't. Isaiah Collier is another guy where I'm not super high on him. Um, but given the penchant for physical guards doing well recently, I wonder if it's something to lean into and just ask yourself, how do you feel about his jumper long term? Because if his jumper can go, then there's some physicality there and some great tools. Tristan Da Silva is probably a guy who could be available if the Raptors just keep 19 and probably will be really high on their board. Um, Another guy who I expect to be high on their board is Khalil Ware and De'Ron Holmes. Both guys, I think, fit a sort of need for the Raptors, which is an athletic, bouncy big. With Khalil, with both of them showing some shooting potential. De'Ron being like the smaller guy, but I think maybe the higher upside. And then Khalil being maybe the more prototypical upside pick with the higher measurements, taller, vertical, whatever. Um, but I think one of those two guys is probably going to be sticking around the NBA for another 10 years. So, and in terms of second round picks that could rise, I mean, Ulrich, again, butcher that name 12 times a day, but Comche, uh, again, really raw, right? But fluid. And I care about how athletes move around the court very much. Like it is a big, big feel thing for me when I see a guy who can switch his hips. Like that was why I really fell in love with Bilal Coulibaly last year. Loved him, and continue to love him to this day. Think he'll be a solid player just because I like how he switches ends. I like his movement patterns. So hip fluidity, flexibility, and all that stuff. So I think Pacome, I think is it Pacome? back home. I haven't watched more than one game of his, so I can't say. Um, there are some players where I think the Raptors will find value at 31. So if they stand pat, they're probably gonna end up with two solid role players. If they move up, it'll probably be because one of these role players is starting to get a little too much hype and might actually have low key star potential. Star, not superstar, star as in like Aaron Gordon. You know what I mean? Like that's probably a really high end outcome for this draft. A guy like Aaron Gordon, a guy who was considered a bust for many years in Orlando, couldn't hack it, not a first, not a first option, et cetera, average 14, 15 points per game, but now is a very valuable part of a championship team in Denver. I think that's the type of guy you want to target in this draft. And if you can get Aaron Gordon part 2 at 13 and you can get him there faster than he got there, then that is a great, great, great pairing with Scotty Barnes. Ideally, that guy can shoot a little bit better than Aaron Gordon, but I think that's kind of where I would be. Let's address the tanking part, and then we'll end this live. Look, man, I understand that a lot of people, get very, very hyped about tanking because you see a prospect 2025 draft pick, you're like, oh man, it's the lowest hanging fruit. It's the lowest hanging fruit. Tanking, if that's your first option, man, that's a sad existence as a fan, right? It's one thing to pull the plug on a season that is going disastrously bad, like we did last year, like we did this year, right? We didn't walk into the season saying tank when we had no pick. And I certainly didn't. But at some point, the strategy shifted, and you're like, okay, there's really no point in trying to chase for something that's completely out of reach. You should always try to go into the season trying to be as good as you can be. If it doesn't work out, then start to strip away the layers, parse out assets, etc., and start moving things away. It doesn't help. It doesn't help your development. It doesn't help your fans. It doesn't help anybody if you just tank. If you tank outright, and look at the teams around the league, right? Who were the most flagrant tankers this year? I think you can make a very solid case that the San Antonio Spurs were the most flagrant tanker. Like it was so obvious, with the way that they were doing things that they were not trying to be good, right? I think you could argue that Detroit did not tank. They were just this bad for a while, and then eventually they just stopped trying. But if you listen to Cade Cunningham prior to the season, there's a lot of talk about trying to get into the play-in. You have to try. I mean, it's up to you how long you want to persist. It's up to you if, you're 5 games, 6 games under 500 and you want to go trade for Jakob Poeltl, again, not that you can because he's on your team now. It's up to you if you want to do that. But I'm just trying to say it doesn't really make a hell of a lot of sense to go into a season aiming to lose basketball games. How are you supposed to develop like that? How do you get people motivated for that? Why do people ignore this very, very crucial part that these are human beings we're talking about? Why do people ignore the fact that it's not fun to come into a team with a shitty culture and that the only way you can build culture is frankly through accountability and winning? So you're going to convince RJ Barrett to learn how to be a good defender this offseason only to tell him next year that the goal of the season is to lose basketball games? How's that work? It's not that easy. So I realized that it's, I'm not trying to be rude, but it's just whenever I listen to people say just tank at all costs, tank for 3 years, tank this, whatever, build up the draft picks. I'm just like, it's such a brainless argument. It's really a brainless argument because at some point, in order to develop, you need the pieces around. This is why the Raptors trading for Kelly Olynyk and not what they paid for him, but trading for guys like Jakob Poeltl, Bruce Brown, etc. As much as you may protest having these guys around, they are accelerating the growth of the players that you are aiming to project as stars. Now, whether you want Scotty to be a star or RJ to be a star or Grady to be a star, or you want your next draft pick to be a star, it's going to help to have some sort of established culture and groundwork in place for them to come into a situation and be taken care of. It matters. It really does. I don't think Vince turns into Vince Carter at all if it's not for Antonio Davis and Charles Oakley and Muggsy Bogues and those guys. What if the Raptors had completely said, we got Vince and we got Tracy McGrady. Let's just tank for, Kwame Brown and Eddie Curry and Marcus Fizer. Let's tank for 2 years and get all these guys on our team. I mean, shit. Like there would be no Knicks playoff series where the team gets bounced, and then the next year without Tracy going past the Knicks and going to the Sixers. I mean, laugh all you want, but for nearly 25 years of Raptors history, that was the high point. That was the pinnacle of Raptors success, right? Charles Oakley, Antonio Davis, Vince Carter, Alvin Williams, Doug Christie, those guys, right? That was the pinnacle of success. It fell apart way too quick. My point is, until We the North, that was the height. And actually, even through most of We the North, because I think a lot of people had sort of said, hey, DeMar, Kyle, they're never going to be as good as Vince, whatever. Don't act like you knew exactly where Kyle's career was going at that point. What if that team hadn't decided, and look at how that team was formed. I feel like a lot of younger fans today don't know that the Raptors traded a young player, a great young player, who went on to have a very serviceable career, Marcus Camby, in order to get Charles Oakley in the first place, to the Knicks. And a lot of Knicks fans were very upset about that, and probably are still upset about that to this day. They did not like that trade. What about, trading Jonathan Bender, the fifth pick in the draft? I swear to God, today, if the Raptors traded number 5 in this year's draft for the, I don't know, logical equivalent of Antonio Davis, who I feel is probably Jakob Poeltl, I feel like people would have an aneurysm. Like, it's one thing to trade a pick in the future, but it's another thing to just trade it on draft night. But Antonio Davis eked out way, way, way more wins than Jonathan Bender ever would have. You have to put these draft picks into context, man. You have to put them into context. Justin Stewart saying Jonathan Bender would go first in this draft. You know what? You might be right. That's the crazy part. You might actually be right. An 18-year-old that moves the way that guy moves, I might actually be pushing him to go number 1 in this draft. It's important to realize what these draft picks are. They are tools to get better, okay? Once you start seeing them as scratchy lottery tickets, you've lost the plot, okay? What do they say? There's 2 types of people, I feel, and these are the 2 types of sports bettors I've encountered in my lifetime, okay? I've encountered the one type of sports bettor who bets like $5-10 every single game to make the game a little bit more fun, and then uses their winnings to go get ice cream or some small thing. There's another type of sports bettor that has 7 screens open and thinks they're about to beat the whole system, and is worried that if one of their bets doesn't win, that they're not going to make rent for the next 2 months. One of those people has figured it out, and the other person is missing the point. My point is, you have to see everything as a variable. Everything is a variable. Scotty Barnes is a variable. RJ Barrett is a variable. Consider them all like cards on a table, okay? Some of these cards are aces, some of them are 6s, some of them are 2s. And guess what? Until it's all said and done, they're all facing down, okay? Now you can say this deck is more likely to produce an A. Yeah, that's your first overall picks, right? It could still produce a 3. It still could. It still could. So this 5th overall pick, 8th overall pick next year that you really, really want, that player could be significantly worse than Grady Dick. That player could be significantly worse than Jakob Poeltl. That player could be significantly worse than Bruce Brown. Happens every year. So I know everyone thinks that they figured out the system, or that the Raptors have figured out the system, but it's just not. That's not true. That's just not true. The Raptors have been phenomenally lucky, and they were very well prepared. And so, but look, you got it right with Christian Koloko, blood clots. You got it right with Jonte Porter, not as a draft pick, but as a free agent pickup. Both those guys would be staples of this team had they not done what they did or suffered through what they suffered. Agree or disagree? 100%, right? Sometimes you're late, sometimes you're early. These things have to matter. So when people say just tank the season, trade everybody, whatever, I think you're missing the point. Among all the trades that I talked about today, let me know in the comments below when this video goes live what you would prefer to do. If I didn't bring up something that you would like me to bring up maybe on our next live, leave that in the comments below as well. I'll also say this, among all the trades that I thought about today that I was just exploring, not that we did too many, I think one of the ones that I liked the most was the one with the Kings. I've been on this Harrison Barnes and Kevin Huerter thing forever. If that can net you a 13th overall pick in exchange for your troubles, and you just have to get rid of Bruce Brown and Chris Boucher and Jalen McDaniels in the process, I'll throw a parade. I think that'd be a great trade for the Raptors. I think it would make you better now to some extent. I think, not to some extent, it would definitely make you better now. It would make you a better shooting team. Harrison Barnes has been long rumored as a Toronto Raptor target, right down to when Brian Colangelo targeted him with the 8th overall pick, only to watch him go 7th to the Warriors, and then we had to pick coin toss Ross. So that all being said, thanks for turning up. We'll talk definitely more about the draft as we go, but expect some trades. I don't know if it's going to be an outright trade for a lottery pick. I don't know if the Raptors move up to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or if they move out of the draft completely. But if this draft from first round to second round completes without the Raptors making a trade, I will instantly apologize because I would have been very wrong about that. You know the vibe saying classic Raptors to get long sought prospects once they are too old. Well, as people get older, they also become a little bit cheaper at times. You got Thaddeus Young, well past his prime. You got Rudy Gay. Brian Colangelo got Rudy Gay 3 years after he initially wanted him. And who else? There have been so many examples of this. So you're right. It is very classic with the Raptors. But I do believe that Harrison Barnes offers something as a role player off the bench. You lacked wing depth, right? You lacked competent defenders. I'm not saying he's a stopper at this point, but he is a veteran. He's a pro. And he's been around the block, okay? Like he's played on a 73 win team. You know, he's been a really good player for a very long time. He's been a starter in the NBA. He commands some respect, and he is an excellent person off the court. Have you ever heard me say excellent 5 times? That is how much I mean it. I know I've known quite a few people who've covered him. Nothing but the highest praise for him. Look at the Denver Nuggets right now. Look at Aaron Gordon. Look at Nikola Jokic. Look at Mike Malone. Good people make your locker room better. Okay. It's funny. I was literally going back yesterday looking through some old reels, and I looked at Dennis Schroeder's first interview as a Raptor, and I was just like, immediately out on him. So fast. I was second most hyped about Koloko going into media day last year. Me too. And that's what I mean. You hit it and health happens, right? Like it can happen. The Celtics drafted Len Bias and watched him die the next day, the same day. They hit, by the way, in my opinion, the Celtics would have extended Larry Bird's championship window by 3-4 years. And that's a very old take and a very repeated take, but it's not a lie. Go watch Len Bias, rest in peace, in college. It was the right pick, just bad luck. It was an ace card. The card burned, right? So you got to consider this all from a variable perspective. It does help to give yourself multiple kicks at the can. I understand the people who want to draft 3-4 players, but at some point, maybe you're holding too many too, right? So consolidating makes sense. I don't mind if the Raptors really fall in love this year. You know, there's a couple of years where they really identified someone they wanted to trade into the draft, and it was hard for them. Giannis year and Shea year, they wanted both those players. They couldn't trade into the draft to get those guys. They tried at 11, 12, 13, whatever. This year, if you really like someone at 13, I feel like 19 plus 31 gets it done. I feel with the reputation that this draft has is, it's pretty flat. The other team doesn't know who you're targeting. Maybe 13 for 19 plus 31 saves just a little bit of money for someone. You know what I mean? Because 31 ain't a guaranteed contract. That's why that contract is so important. because it's not a guaranteed contract. You can use it as a two-way. You can waive the guy. You can draft the guy for a draft and stash. You can do a lot of things with the second round pick. I believe that 13 or 14, one of those picks, like a late lottery pick for 19 plus 31, is a type of pick is a type of trade we see almost every single year. So if the Raptors really want to consolidate 2 into 1, and they're really in love with somebody at 13 or 14 that they feel won't be there at 19, you finally have some assets to throw someone's way. Additionally, if you want to trade even higher into the draft, how opposed would I be to, I don't know, 19 plus Indiana's 2026 pick, trade both those picks to a team to move into the top 8? Get your pick back from San Antonio. San Antonio, you really want 2 picks? Or you want vets around? I don't know. My point is, I don't want to hurt our cap situation necessarily. And I understand that, potentially taking, Harrison Barnes and Kevin Herter's situation, maybe it milks out some cap space, but you have to use this cap space either to absorb contracts or to sign a shitty contract yourself. I don't think the NBA needs any more shitty contracts. You don't need to overpay somebody to a 2-year deal the way Indiana did with Bruce Brown and then use him as a trade piece. I don't think that's going to work twice. So, you know, use Bruce Brown, get some players who kind of fill some role playing spots, in my opinion. Get off of Jalen McDaniels because he's just pretty useless at this point. And in that situation, in that exchange, you traded you technically opened up a roster spot as well, didn't you? Because, well, actually, yeah, you did. You got Harrison Barnes. You flatten out your roster spot because basically you trade Chris Boucher, Bruce Brown, and Jalen McDaniels. So you trade 3 players for Harrison Barnes, Kevin Herter, 2 solid vets, plus you get the 13th pick, which is probably going to be a good young player. So Justin Stewart saying, do you prefer Claxton signing or to trade for absorb cap space? I don't know if I don't know if Nick Claxton wants to be here. If he does, certainly, I don't think that Brooklyn used him well last year. And I feel like a lot of bad things happened in Brooklyn last year, especially towards the second half of that season. And I'm personally of the mindset that I would love to make a trade with the Brooklyn Nets. Maybe you can give them some picks back for all their trouble. Nick Claxton is definitely a player that I would consider for the Raptors, for sure. Jakob and Bruce for Ben Simmons and Day'Ron Sharpe. Oh, shoot. For real? Ben Simmons? And then you just buy out Ben Simmons? So you're basically trading Jakob to get off his contract? And you're eating $40 million of Ben Simmons, or you're holding him out? Like, my only issue with Ben, and I don't know Ben, and I've stood pretty firm defending him for a long time, but it's hard to ignore his decline as a player. But also it's hard to ignore the media shitstorm that comes with him. Like, it's hard not to. I feel like trading for Ben Simmons is the type of thing that the Raptors never do, right? So if they do it, it'll hold up because weirdly enough, they've been doing a lot of things that are outside of the norm of what they usually do, which is probably a good thing. Like trading away Pascal, OG, and Precious was something that I never thought. Like if you would ask me at the beginning of the year, oh, middle of this year, within 2 trades in a couple of weeks, they're going to trade Pascal, OG, and Precious. I'd be like, who'd they get back? Like they probably got back like the freaking greatest player in the world or something. Like they traded for like, I don't know, they traded for like Jason Tatum or something. I would never believe they traded all 3 of those players and got back what they got back. Especially the positions that they got back, Like you tell me like, oh, like given how the Raptors construct their roster, Emmanuel Quickley is going to be a point guard going forward. I would not have believed that coming into last season. So, they're certainly operating in a different direction. Same thing with Grady Dick. Like that pick caught me off guard last year, and I have not been surprised by the Raptors in a very long time. So that shows me that they are changing what they're doing a little bit, and that's not a bad thing. I wonder what kind of contract Simmons gets in 2 years. It's probably not going to be an NBA contract, but if it is an NBA contract, it'll be a minimum contract or like a 5-year Sorry, like a 5 million a year type of deal. Imagine we did that Paul George and Westbrook trade all the way back. Paul George and Westbrook for what? What was it? Siakam and Kyle Lowry. Was that the deal? Ross 101 saying we'd be cooked. No, you wouldn't, because I believe the caveat of that deal was that you get to keep Kawhi Leonard. So no, you would not be cooked. You wouldn't be cooked. You'd be the Clippers. Um, SP saying Fred and Pascal. It was Fred and Pascal? That's impossible. The salaries would never match. It was not Fred and Pascal. Siakam and Fred and all our picks. I don't believe that. I just don't. Just the salaries don't match, bro. Like, how are you supposed to make that trade if the salaries don't match? Siakam hadn't even extended onto his contract yet, or was it? But Fred wasn't making nearly enough to absorb that much money. It wouldn't work. Crip saying, "Yep, Simmons needs a big season in this contract here. No, nobody's paying him." I don't think it matters what kind of season he has. To be honest, I don't think it's going to matter too much. Matching the salaries would be impossible. That's what I'm saying. Anyways, let's talk more draft. It's coming up soon. Tonight, I will join you after the New York Knicks versus the Indiana Pacers, as well as Game 5, Minnesota Denver. I'm very curious to see how the Nuggets respond. Yes, let's briefly talk about the playoffs. I skipped out on yesterday's games because I was so pissed off, bro. So pissed. Dallas can't make free throws. OKC closes the gap in the series. They even it up 2-2. And what the hell is going on with Boston, man? I mean, Donovan Mitchell doesn't play. You sleep. You nearly let them win the game in the end. That was crazy. I understand the Boston Celtics are never going to lose that game, but man, you are a 10-second miracle, couple of half court heaves or crazy shots from Sam Merrill or Max Strus or something, or you having it's too close. It's too close. It's too close. It was 9 points. No, it was 8 points, and then Karis LeVert took a random 2 with 2 seconds to go, and then they didn't foul. So I just thought that was crazy. But today, I fully expect. Now, this is my expectation. I was wrong on everything yesterday. I haven't been wrong in a while, by the way. I'm not gloating. I just want to be real. I haven't been wrong very much over the last week. I picked Dallas to win Game 3. They did. I picked Denver to win Game 3 and 4. They did. And I picked New York to win Game 3. I picked Pacers to win Game 4. But everything has happened exactly how I thought it would. I chose to think of Jakob acquisition as the final payment to the Spurs for Kawhi trade. LOL. I also thought of it that way, and then I realized that's like we didn't do anything wrong there. We gave them value. We even gave them the player that we inevitably traded back for. A Tong saying, does that mean Charles Barkley was right yesterday? I don't remember what Charles Barkley said, but I'm assuming a broken clock can be right 2 times a day. Love Charles, but man, he's wrong on his predictions sometimes. But today I'm expecting Denver and New York to win. Now there's a problem here, which is that I like New York and I don't like Indiana. So I may not be being objective about this. It's possible Indiana wins. I believe that the Knicks got smacked a couple of days ago, largely because they just took a break. That sounds stupid, but I believe it to be true. Like, I think they kind of knew that the writing was on the wall. They can't just play 48 minutes every single night and still have a series. So I think they just kind of laid one, and they just didn't bring it. But I don't expect a similar result today. Worst case scenario, I expect the Knicks to lose by 8 or 7. They're not getting blown out in the Garden. I just don't think that's going to happen. But this Aaron Nesmith on Jalen Brunson adjustment has been very long overdue, in my opinion, and very effective. We can also do a mock draft probably next weekend in which it makes me sad to do mock drafts at this point because the Raptors don't have their pick. And, I had done all this research and preparation for us keeping our pick, but I had deliberately limited draft content because I didn't want us to, I kind of wanted us to just have a muted emotional response to losing the pick. Like I felt we were going to lose the pick for 2 weeks. I felt like we were going to lose the pick. I've been talking about it. And I felt like, can I just reverse jinx it? Like, can I just say we're going to lose it, and then we get it? So I was just trying to prepare our community and ourselves for that. I think I might be getting a cough, or I might be losing my throat, losing my voice or something. We talked for like 3 hours yesterday on the panel, man. That was loud, and then 2 hours today, so it's a lot of talking. Anyways, I will say this: I do expect the Raptors to be active in the trades, and I would like this community to start being a voice of reason in talks about this stuff. When people inevitably just go to the lowest common denominator and say like, let's just tank next season. This draft pick is so good. This draft pick's so good. There's a way to do it. There's a way to do it that doesn't, ruin you. And there's also a way to do it perfectly and have it blow up in your face the way Detroit did 2 years in a row, right? So, yeah. Is anyone else other than OG injured on the Knicks? What are you talking about, bro? Like half their team is injured. Yes, Bogdanovich is injured. Mitchell is injured. Randall is injured. A lot of players injured. Anyways, we'll talk to you guys later. Enjoy the games tonight. I will see you in the post game. And hit subscribe if you haven't already. By the way, if you want to see a really nice emotional reel that, maybe makes you appreciate the Denver Nuggets a little bit more, because I do want people rooting for that team. That's why I make all these reels about Jokic and Aaron Gordon, etc., Jamal Murray, because I want people to root for this team. They're not a huge market team. A lot of people clown on them. Some people don't like them because they're very foreign, because Jamal's Canadian. And um, you know, yeah, like all my reels are about the underdogs, right? I have an OKC Thunder reel, right? Like I want people to root for the small market teams. So yeah, definitely go check out on Instagram or Twitter or even on YouTube. I posted in all three places. It's nice words from Aaron Gordon about why he became so unselfish, and then think about how that might apply 3-4 years from now when, I don't know, a teammate is asked about how they became unselfish as the Toronto Raptors, and then think about them talking about Scotty Barnes. Anyways, talk to you later, man. Peace.